Hello guys, today we'll be modeling and procedurally texturing these beer mugs and keg using Blender 4. First thing we've got to do is some setup. We're going to head over to the collections and create 3 collections, one for the models, which we'll place our cube inside, one for references, which we do not have at the moment, one for the rendering, which will have our cameras and lighting. Later on the tutorial we'll get rid of the lights and then use a different setup for the lighting. We'll head over to edit preferences and then we're going to enable our add-ons. We're going to click on add-ons and then search light. We want to enable this tri-lighting. It's going to give us a rim light, a full light and a backlight just to help us with the lighting of the 3D model, making it look a lot nicer. Next, we're going to head over to Polyhaven and then download this HDRI. Link in the description for where to get this resource. Now with our setup complete, we can start by sacrificing our default cube. We're going to turn off our render collection as we don't require at the moment. Now there's less clutter. If you guys want what keys I'm pressing, it's down here at the bottom right. Okay, we're going to start by adding our cylinder and change the parameters to 16 edges and vertices. Change our radius to 5 centimeters, 0.05. We're going to change our depth to 20 centimeters, so it's about 20 centimeters high. It is 20 centimeters high. Now we're going to press tilde just above the tab and then view selected, so it zooms us in. We're going to right click, we're going to say auto shade smooth, so it'll give us an angle of 30 degrees, which is perfect. We're going to go into edit mode by pressing tab. We can press 3 or just select this face select at the top. I'm just going to press 3. Then you can just delete it. Faces. At the bottom one, we're going to press Y to separate it. Press G to see that it is separated indeed. We're going to go and add 3 edge loops. Now we're going to bevel those edge loops so we can get bands. We're going to bevel it by 1 centimeter, so 0.01. It's exactly 1 centimeter. Now we're going to tab out of this so we have a fallback in case something occurs. Press Shift D to duplicate it. G in the X axis and then 0.2. This is going to be our first mark. If you've, like me, were on one of the other collections, you might just want to move your meshes into your models collection. Then you can turn off the references as we don't have any references. Okay, so the first mark we're going to do, let me just get my annotation tool. So we're going to do a mark that has a curve like this. The next one we're going to do, it's going to be the opposite. It's going to be bulging outside, the more custom normal mark. So the mark is going to have nice handle, looks something like this, and then this one's just going to have the classic mug shape. That actually. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add another. We're just going to grab these edges over here. Turn on proportional editing. Make sure we have a median point selected, and then this one has to be connected and then smooth. Press S, Shift Z, so we don't actually change the height of the band. And we're going to press 0.8. So it's going to bring it in exactly 1 centimeter. We're just going to scale it until just before the bottom edge, before this edge starts moving. We're going to get rid of this weird bumps here in a moment. We just require it for the placement of the bands. Okay, we're going to grab these edges. Shift D. G. So we can see we actually have it. Right click, press P and then selection. Now we can just go out of edit mode. Make sure we have just the cup selected. Press / so we go into isolation mode. Just focus on the object itself. I'm going to grab these edges. now we're going to dissolve them. Now we get a nice shape, exactly where we want it. This is exactly the middle point, and the bands will be, of course, here, here, and at the bottom. Okay. Our next step will involve us selecting, going out of edit mode. Now we're going to press Shift S and then say cursor to selected. So we get it exactly in the center point. We're going to use this with the spin tool in just a moment. Next, we can go and add our modifiers. You can technically add these modifiers to the base shape, but I'm going to add it here each time as it's going to be easier for the recordings. I'm going to add my modifier. We want to add, first we're going to add solidify, just to give us thickness. So give us thickness at the bottom and at the top. We're going to go back into edit mode. We want to change the offset to 1, so it offsets in the outward direction. So it gives us thickness. It doesn't take away from the shape of our cup. Okay, now we're going to go and we're going to just, you can pick any one of these planks. They're going to be planks in a moment. Grab this one, and then all the way to the bottom. Press Control I, so we get the inverted selection, and then delete it. I'm going to say faces. That's going to get everything. Okay, we actually need our bottom, so you just want to not select the bottom. So you just press Shift and click on it again. And then we can press X and then faces. Perfect. We'll adapt the shape of this bottom part in just a moment, once we're done with our spin tool. Okay, before we start spinning, we're going to apply our solidify modifier. We're going to go out of edit mode and then apply it. Then we're going to go back into edit mode. I want to do the beveling first, because if you use the bevel modifier, it's not going to bevel it correctly. It's going to bevel these inside faces also, and then you're going to have gaps inside your cup. You're going to be able to look through it, or have a light leakage. I select all these edges that I'm selecting at the moment. So the top 4, and then these 2 we want to select. Nothing at the bottom, as you won't know the side. Now we're going to bevel it for 1 millimeter. 2 zeros and a 1. So exactly 1 millimeter over here width. Now that we have our French fry looking piece of wood, we're gonna go back into edit mode, select just the French fry, and we're gonna use the spin tool. The spin tool will always spin around the origin point, your cursor. Always spin around this little dot. We're gonna select our spin tool. We're gonna spin. It doesn't exactly matter how many times you spin. We're just gonna change this to 16 and then enter this manually 360. 360, not 60. 360. And we want to use duplicates, or else it's gonna merge the stuff. Just take one and spin it so many times. There we have our cup. It's pretty much done. Go and make our final adjustments. Click this one. We want to scale it in every axis except the Z axis by 1.2. Or, okay, it's going to be easier if we just separate it. P, selection, separate. Now that we have this one loose, we can go over here. And we can go to the item tab. We're going to change this to 12 centimeters since we added 1 centimeter for each plank, because the original one was 5 centimeters. 5? Yeah, well, it was 5 centimeters in diameter, so it's 10 in total. Now we're going to add a centimeter on this side to this side, so it'll be 12. So we can put in 12.12, 12, 2. We're also going to go and move this up slightly. G in the Z 0.001. So it just clips nicer into the wood. Just to add more emphasis on the wood itself and make it look a little less sharp, we're gonna bevel this bottom part also. 0.001. Just a small bevel so the edge isn't as sharp as it is currently. Perfect. Our mug is almost done. Now we're going to go back out of isolation mode, / on the numpad. We're going to grab these bands. We're going to change the dimensions to be exactly... We're going to change the dimensions to be exactly 0.1. Yeah, 0.1. 0.1. Another one. So it's inside the mesh, so you won't see them. Grab these bands, so they're going to be sticking out in a moment. Going to add a modifier. We're going to add a solidify again. This time, solidify is going to be offset to the outside again. It should be fine. Exactly 1 centimeter is perfect. We want to do one other step. We want to go and tick the rim only. We're going to hide this one for a moment. You'll see it will just disable the rim on the inside, so we only have the outside. Alt H, bring it back. We can now go and for this one we can actually apply a bevel modifier. Bevel modifier. I'm going to change the shape to again 1mm. 0.001. It's just going to bevel these edges off nicely for us. Okay, so we're going to start by making the handle for the first cup. It's quite easy to do the handle. There's a couple of modifiers we're going to need, and we're going to start by using a Bezier curve. So we're going to go Shift Add, because at the moment it's going to add it right over here. Shift Add. Then other curves, we want to add top. It's off the screen. Shift Add. Okay, it's huge. We're gonna go into edit mode and then just scale it down. Tell the blue dots on, the red dots on so far off the screen. We're gonna rotate it on the x-axis, 90. We're gonna rotate it on the y-axis, 90. So we have it more vertically. And then G in the x, so we can just move it to the side. First thing we're gonna do is grab this edge, rotate it, then bring it over here. Doing the same with the bottom one. We want it to touch over here and here. You grab everything, right click, and then subdivide. So we get a third point over here. You're going to turn off proportional editing, or else you're going to keep fighting yourself. At the moment it should be flat. You can hide this cup actually. Tab and hide. So it should be perfectly parallel to the y-axis. To the x-axis, because the x-axis should be parallel to it. I'm going to start by just rotating these points until you get a nice curve. In this case, I think that's a pretty nice looking curve. Rotate this one out of it. Rotate it a bit back. And this part is all up to you guys. You can play with it as much as you want. If you want something like looks like this or something else, I just like this because it looks pretty nice. Now I'm going to press E to extrude one other vertex to get these edges to not be so far apart. I'm going to click on the dot, and then you're just going to grab this end and then just bring it closer. The closer it is to the actual vertex of the line, the less of a curve it's going to make. And the easier you're going to make tight corners. Grab it and rotate it. Do the same with this one. Plus the extrusion is going to be like forever. Rotate it a bit. Then going to press E again. I'm going to leave it like that. I think that will look nice. Maybe I'll rotate it so it takes safety concerns. Just make sure it clips a little bit. Okay, Now we're gonna go over to the settings for the curve. I'm gonna change this render resolution to 12 also, or else you're not gonna see what you are making here at the moment when you render out the model. Next, we're gonna go to geometry. We wanna do an offset of 5 millimeters, so 0.005, and we want to extrude it by 1.00. Yeah, that's gonna be that's 1 centimeter. It's a bit thick, so we want to do half a millimeter, half a centimeter. It's 5 centimeters. I want to do 5 millimeters. There. That doesn't look too bad. Now we can clearly see we actually need to add another point. Just extrude so it goes inside the mesh. But as always, I'm just gonna this one, and that point. Just this one smaller from the start, or else it's gonna fighting me. Either next one, whatever. We just need it for that little bit so it actually goes and clips into the wood. Perfect. That doesn't look too bad. Now we can just do some corrections. We can see the mesh is clearly going to give us problems. We're going to go over to our modifiers. I click add, generate. We want to add a solidify. And if everything was set up correctly at this moment, it should be in the middle of the cup. Perfect. It should be -1 since we moved it this way. Just fix that bend over there. It's too sharp. That's why it's not liking it. Top of this, we can go and add a bevel modifier. I don't think it's going to work at the moment. Just check. Yeah, it's actually just going to sharpen it up. Then we can just decrease this. 0.01. It's just going to sharpen it up quite a lot. Bevel up. I think if we leave it off, it's going to be better. It's gonna let's delete the bevel. Okay, that's our first mug. We'll get back to the textures. Just get to the front side. I just want to move this a bit in. We'll get to the textures after we have modeled the second mug. Okay, now we're gonna go out of edit mode. Tab, and then we're gonna go and Alt H to unhide everything. Grab this one, duplicate it, move it in the x-axis by 40 centimeters, so it's just to the right of this mug. We go into edit mode. We're gonna add an H loop there, across that way, and across this way. These 3 new H loops are the ones that are gonna stay. The ones just outside it. So this one, and this one are going to form our bands, the metal rings, as for the other mug. Okay, we're going to go and turn on proportional editing, make sure it's smooth and connected. We're going to check that median point is again. Select this band, scale, Shift Z, so we don't make it taller. We're going to say 1.2, 3, actually it's 1.2, 2, and then we're just going to adjust our scale just before it starts moving this bottom part again. Just before it starts moving this bottom part again. That looks fine. Okay, again we're going to select our bands. You have to select like this and not like this. So you have to select an edge that is going vertically and not horizontally. Select these edges. Duplicate them, Shift D. Make sure that they're loose. P selection. I'm gonna go in tab. I'm gonna press out of edit mode / to go into isolation. Now we're gonna delete these other edges just to clean up the geometry a bit, or else we're gonna have a bunch of unused geometry. X edges. Dissolve edges. It's fine, it's going to give us a bit of a sharp transition between the different edges, but it's not going to be visible as our bands are going to be on top of them. Okay. Just like the previous one, we're going to go and add a modifier, so click on orange. Spanner, whichever one you call it. I'm going to go to generate. We want to add a solidify. Again, we want to outset, so we're going to put 1 there instead of -1. And the thickness of 1 centimeter is perfectly fine. Okay. We're going to go back into edit mode. We want to turn the on cage modifier on so it shows the mesh on the inside and the outside. Again, we're going to separate our bottom. P selection so it's loose from the rest of the mug. We are going to grab one of these edges, or one of these planks. Control I to invert the selection, X, and then dissolve faces. We don't want to dissolve, we want to delete faces. Or we have a different shape of French fry. Okay, we're gonna go and apply our solidify modifier. So we can start by beveling the edges again. Select our top face, go into edge select, and then grab these other 4 edges. Oh, we've got all our edges selected. Again, Control B, 0.001. Keep the edges at the top. Select those. Control B, .001. So again, it does 1 millimeter of beveling. Perfect. We can now go back to our spin tool. Select everything. To the spin tool. Okay. We're gonna wanna just go out into not edit mode. Select our model. Shift S. Cursor to selection. Just gonna put it over the origin of our single plank. Go back into edit mode and now spin tool should work correctly. Circle. We're gonna make sure we select 12. I'm gonna select 360. 360. I'm gonna change this 12 to 16, sorry. Perfect. Reason why I do not bevel the inside edge is if you do bevel it, you're gonna get gaps right here along these joints, which isn't gonna make this mug very watertight. So this is perfect. That's the white shape and everything. If you want to make it a bit more bulgy, you're just gonna grab. If you want to make it more bulgy, you should have. It's probably gonna be easier just to do another mug. You want to do something like that, but if you were to go on with this mug, you would just press Shift S, Shift Z, and then just bulge it out even more. But I'm fine with how it is, so I'm not gonna do that. Okay, let's go out of X-ray mode. That is not a very nice way to look at the model. Okay, we're gonna start working on the bands for this model. So we're gonna go out of isolation mode. I'm gonna try and go into the inside of the cup and see where this is. Just gonna again change the dimensions of the rings themselves just slightly. So we want to make it a 12 centimeters. Just add another 5 at the end. Just want it slightly bigger. Slightly bigger. So it makes it 5 millimeters bigger. You'll see on all of these models we now have a regular scale. It's not one. We'll fix that at the end just before we start texturing. You'll see over here the same. And I think the same for the bottom over here. It also has a regular scale. It's not uniform one. We'll fix that at the end. I'm going to apply the certify modifier here as well. Before we start scaling it, we're going to bevel it. Just show you something in a moment. Control B, Alt 0, 1 millimeter. Okay. So our beveling over here is 1 millimeter up and 1 millimeter to the side. Where over here, where we have the irregular scale, it's not. It's 1 millimeter up and then 1 millimeter and then 2/10 of a millimeter to the side. The XY axis instead of the Z axis. So it's a bit, it's not equal. And that's thanks to the irregular scale. Okay, next we're gonna do exactly the same thing. Just gonna scale it. S Shift Z. Then at 1.2. Move this one down a bit. GZ negative 0.001. Oh. Add another 0 and then a 5. Yes. So I'm gonna move in the Z axis 3 zeros and a 5, so it's half a millimeter. Just so it doesn't clip so much. That's perfect. Now to continue with our bands. Out of edit mode, let's grab our bands. You should be seeing them poking in right here. I'm gonna add a modifier, certify modifier again. I'm gonna say rim only. Change the outside to positive again. And that's exactly what we want, and it doesn't look too bad. Nice. If the band is not sticking far enough for you, you can just add another half a centimeter. Just add another 5 at the end. It's going to give you more thickness, or add another 2 or 3 millimeters. But I'm just going to stick with what it is, as I'm perfectly fine with just 1 centimeter and just slightly sticking out. Okay, now on top of this one, we're going to add our bevel modifier. Generate bevel modifier. Change its amount back to 1 millimeter. 001. Perfect. And that's our second mug. I'm gonna do a little bit of cheating again. I'm gonna grab the handle from our first one, duplicate it, G in the X dot 2, so it moves 20 centimeters to the right. I go G in the X a bit back. Just touching there. Clipping on the inside, the same for this one. Inside of the mug. Go back to the front view. We're gonna grab our mesh over here and rotate it. That one. So let's see this. Proportion is off. This one again. Shoot it. Just gonna change that there. Closer. Okay, for this one, like I said, I want to do a shape that's gonna be like this. It's one of those nice C-shaped handles. So we can go and delete these ones. Don't need those vertices. We can then rotate this one again. Straight. there, and then this one is just gonna move and rotate a bit. Grab this one, rotate it some more. Get it right across the x-axis, across the red line. That's about the center of this one. So flat, rotate this one some more. Perfect. There. Have a nice look. It's too big, just bring it in a bit. Give us a bit more of that one, and then this one you can just grab that one. Perfect. And that's our second mug. Looks quite nice. Now with your beer mugs done, we can start modeling the beer keg. We're going to select our metal rings, the wood, and the bottom of the cup. We're going to duplicate it. Move it in the x-axis, 1/2 meter. We're going to rotate it in the x-axis 90 degrees, so it's laying on its side, and we're going to scale it 3 times. So it's larger than the beer mugs, but not much larger. It's not as big as a barrel. With all these changes made, we can start applying our scale and rotation, as the next couple of steps without the rotation and scale set correctly is not going to be that fun to do. So we're going to press A, select everything, Control A, rotation and scale. You'll immediately see your bands disappear into your wood. This is normal, as now they're working to the correct scale and need to have more thickness. So we're going to head over to our solidify modifier and then increase the thickness to about 3 centimeters. We're going to go to the back of our beer keg. We're going to go into edit mode, select everything, and we want to scale it S.85, so 85% of the original size of the mesh. This should make it so it just clips neatly into the mesh without standing out too far. We're also going to move it in the y-axis by 4 centimeters in the negative direction, so it just moves it in and gives us a nice little lip. Next, we're going to go and add ourselves a mirror modifier to reduce the amount of work that we need to do. We're going to generate and then say mirror. We're next going to remove it from the x-axis and set it to the y-axis. If your object is not mirroring correctly like mine, it just means that your origin is not in the center of your barrel. This is easy to fix. We're just going to grab our little pipette and then select our barrel. So this should mirror it according to wherever the origin of this barrel is. If your barrel's origin is not in the center of the barrel, that's easy to fix. You're going to right click, you're going to say set origin, and then you want to say origin to geometry. And it should set it somewhere in the center of your mesh. If that doesn't work, you're going to want to select your barrel, then go into edit mode. You're going to go into transparent mode. You want to select these items. Layout. You want to go. You want to select these middle edges. You're going to press Shift S and then cursor to selection. And after that, you're going to press. You're going to go out of edit mode. Then you can then right click, set origin, then set to 3D cursor. That should fix your bottom and put it in the correct place. I'm going to go back out of X-ray mode, as I don't need to do any of this. That's why I didn't click on the things. Next, we're going to place our tap right around this height and then in the center. So we're going to grab our edge over here. The same for this one. So it's not the bottom planks, but the ones just above them. I'm gonna press Shift S then cursor to selected. Should put our cursor somewhere around here, but floating in the middle of nowhere. With this done, we're gonna add our right click, shift add ourselves a cylinder. Gonna change the vertices back to 16 again. Gonna change our radius to let's do 0.5 centimeter, so give us a centimeter thick pipe. So 0.005, and we're gonna change the depth, so that would be the length of the pipe, to let's do 5 centimeters to start with, and then we'll cut it down from there. We're gonna okay, let's not make it 5, let's make it 2.5. So we're gonna change the 5 to 2, then add a 5 at the back. That should be perfect. Now we're going to rotate it 90 degrees in the x-axis. As you can see, it's already clipping into our mesh, which is perfect. I'm going to grab these edges over here, just the back face. You can also just press 3, then select the face. Go G in the y-axis by 0.01 centimeter in the negative. We want it to go just outside of the mesh, as we want to actually make it a bit thicker. So we're going to press E, S, and then we're going to say 2, so it's double as double the radius that the pipe coming out of it's going to have. This we will then extrude in the y-axis, which should just be as is, by 1 centimeter. So it again clips, E in the Y by 1.01. So 1 centimeter again. That looks perfect. From this point onward, we're gonna want to select the most bottom vertex of our cylinder. Gonna press our origin there. Cursor to selected. Going to change our axis to around the x-axis, so it spins it like this. Actually, if you click over here, you see it's going to spin it around that. We're now going to select our face over here, and we're going to spin it. We want to put in 90 to get a right angle, and we want to reduce the number of steps to 6, as 12 would just be too much detail and a waste of geometry. Now we can extrude it by another 3 centimeters, so 0.03. That's too much. 2. Let's do 2 centimeters. We're gonna ES.8, so 80% of the original mesh, and then E1, and yeah, 0.01. The negative axis, so it goes inside the mesh. Next, we're going to select these 2 top faces. Shift S, cursor to selection. We're going to add another. Shift add. We're going to add another cylinder. I'm going to decrease its size to about half. So 2.5, and we're going to change its height. Its height is let's change the depth to 2, so 2 centimeters. I'm going to move it up by 1 centimeter. 0.01. Okay, that's too much. 1, and let's do 0.075, so it's 75 millimeters up, 7.5 millimeters up, so 0.0075, so it's still clipping inside the mesh. Next, we're going to grab the top face, Shift S, cursor to selected, We're gonna add ourselves a UV sphere. It's gonna be huge. We're gonna change its segments to 16. And we're gonna change its radius to, let's try 1 centimeter to start with. That's comically large. So we're gonna do half a centimeter. Add another 0 and then a 5. That's perfect. I'm gonna grab this lever. And then we're gonna turn on. I'm gonna change this one from medium point to 3D cursor. Press Shift D to dupe. I'm gonna select this pipe. Shift D to duplicate it. R in the y-axis, and we want to say 90, and then negative, as we wanted the spout to come out the right side the handle. From this point onwards, we are gonna E and then S. Okay, yeah, you can just let's turn the medium point back on. S, just make it a bit thicker. Want to increase it? Yeah, 1.3 should be fine. So 1.3. Then you can just do the first one and then pull down. It should set all the other ones to exactly the same. Then G in the x-axis by width for 3.003. No, I need 1 0 less 3. You can then go and bevel the back side to edge loop. So just roll the scroll wheel. Gives it a nice round back end there. You can go in here and select this part. Just Shift S, Shift X, so we don't make it shorter. Just decrease that a bit. That actually looks acceptable. Might want to go in here and then just add another edge loop. Bring it up 95.095% of the way, so 95% of where it was. I'm gonna scale this. Give us a nice little bump, because this part's going to be wooden. And we also want to scale it by 1.3. That seems to look perfect for the scale of our objects. Exactly, that looks nice. That's looking pretty well on the beer keg. Now we're going to select everything. Gonna right click and then auto shade smooth, just in case you missed any other part of the mesh that you haven't shaded smooth. Okay, we'll get back to this part a bit later once we start texturing. The next step is we're gonna go and add some feet to our beer keg. No, the shape of the feet is gonna be, just deselect everything or else it's gonna be hard to see. We're gonna basically have a nice resting cradle. Is then gonna come down like this and then have a nice round bottom, flat at the bottom, and then the same on this side. Then again a round edge over here. Okay. To do that, we're basically just gonna select our starting point as being, let's use these bands. We'll probably just move it a bit forward. Okay. Let's just use the barrel itself and then move our plank around. Shift cursor to selection. So places the cursor at the center of the barrel. We're going to add ourselves a nice cube, because why not? We just deleted the default cube when we started. Now we have to bring it back again. Resurrection. Okay. First of all, we're going to make the thickness of the wood about, I think, say 5 centimeters, a nice thickness for a plank. 0.5. And then we can just press enter, which is going to scale it down quite a bit. That's fine. We can now just bring it down. Perfect. There's one of two ways we can approach the mirroring of this object. One, we move everything forward and then mirror it again around the barrel. Or number two, which is the way I'm going to go at the moment, is I'm going to go into edit mode and then just move it to wherever I want it. I'm going to go over and apply a mirror modifier. I want to select the y-axis again, so it's going to mimic what I'm doing at the front, at the back. Okay, so now that's in the center. There's actually another trick that we're going to do to cut the work even more in half. We're going to add an edge loop down the center. I select, you can pick which side you want to do. I usually pick the side without the X on it to delete, and then I work on this side, on the right side. So I'll press X and then set vertices. And I'm also going to turn on X mirroring now. So our next step is gonna be to extrude it, not to extrude it, to move the edge until we're happy. Right around here is where I think it should be. So another 10 centimeters. 10 centimeters. I don't want to do 1 centimeter. 10 centimeters. That should be fine. Because at this point we're gonna want to start doing our curve again. Grab this part. I think we should do another 10 centimeters in the z-axis 0.1. 0.1. Why is it so large? What's that? 10 centimeters. That's okay. Again, that's 10 centimeters. So we don't want to do 10 centimeters. Let's see how big this is. Basically, just want to double it. So yeah, it's 5 centimeters. 0.05. Then we want to extrude this another 5 centimeters or so. 0.05. Should be fine. Okay, we're gonna start by just grabbing this edge, and this edge, and then Control V all three of them at once. So they have the same number of vertices and the same number of edges and everything. That looks fine. So auto shade smooth. I'm gonna want to auto shade smooth. I'm gonna increase our angle to anything above 30. I usually do 45 as the next step. So it's either 30, 45, 50, and so on. Okay. Now we're gonna need to. We might wanna. Okay, we're gonna have to undo this step for just a moment. Get back to it. We're gonna add ourselves. Let's do 3 edge loops. Show in a moment why. Let's get back to beveling. Control B. See how much this is. The width is 1 centimeter. 0, 1. Let's do 1.5. Okay, that's fine. Okay. Now that we apparently no longer have our modifier. If you still do, it's perfect. If you don't, I'm just going to add my mirror modifier back again, and then across the y-axis also. I'm going to set it to auto shade smooth again, and then 45 should be fine. Now to get the next part of our mesh correct, we're just going to go into edit mode, select everything, and then G and the Z by 0.025, which is going to give us our ability to just cut this mesh a bit. So we're going to go into the top, not into the top view, just until we can see this edge over here, the center one. We're gonna go into proportional editing. Go G in the Z axis, then just bring that down slightly. So it's just not inside the mesh. Then we're gonna go, we might want to go into X-ray mode to make this a bit easier, or just we can just grab this edge as well. Might want to turn off the proportional editing tool, and then just move this one down as well. Right over here, grab this one. Just go over to vertex select, just grab those vertices. Then move it back down. Yeah, probably the best way is going to be to put it right around the bottom of the barrel. We do exactly the same with this part. And if it's slipping, it's not that bad. We're not going to worry too much about it. We just want a nice supporting structure for the barrel. Go back out of X-ray mode. Check how this looks. See, it's a bit too much. We'll just move it up some more, since we probably worked according to the rims instead of the barrel. We just grab G in the Z axis, and there. Should just clip into it. And there's our barrel's feet done. We can now go and add ourselves a bevel modifier. Change the bevel size to again 1mm.001. You can up this amount, not to 10. Let's try 002. Nope, I need another 0. Instead of 1mm, we double it to 2mm. No, I think the 1mm should be fine. And 0. Two zeros, 1. I'm gonna change our auto smooth to not be 45, as that's what's currently causing these problems. We're gonna set it to 40. That's perfect. That's our beer keg done. Next, we'll be doing our texturing and setting up a procedural texture for the wood and the metal. We're just about ready to add the textures. I'm just going to do some final adjustments to the size of some of the objects, just in case you guys want to use it outside of Blender, inside another 3D software or a game engine, or you want a 3D printer or something. We're just going to fix the scale a bit. Okay, we're going to do this by adding a human reference. Perfect. We're just going to move this guy over so we can see his hands to the scale of our cups. Yeah, cups are pretty much perfect, but our beer keg is a little bit on the small side. Fairly certain no one will be able to even open that tap, break it off. We need a little dwarf to open our beer taps. So I'm gonna hide our guy for scale. Judging by the size that the beer keg currently is, I would probably say we have to make it 1.5 times as big as it currently is. And we're also, yeah, again gonna just change the tap scale again, because I think it's probably gonna go another 1.5 times, but separately from the rest of the mesh. The moment it's attached to our barrel itself, as you can see. You can go goodbye again. I grab everything that's here, press S, 1.5. That looks about right. Bring back our reference. Yeah, that looks like a nice beer keg. Perfect. People will be able to fill up a few mugs. Let's hide the human again. We don't need him anymore. Like I said, this scale of this tap is far too small, just judging by the other beer mugs. We're gonna at least scale it another 1.5 times. Go over to vertex select. Edge select will probably be easier, since we're gonna have problems over here if we're trying to select vertices. Grab the handle, the top, and this one, and then S 1.5. Again, we're gonna move this tap a bit forward. GY negative 0.01, 1 centimeter. It should still clip on the inside for about 1 centimeter. Perfect. Now with everything selected, we can just press Ctrl A. We're gonna say scale. Again, our rings are gonna freak out a little bit, but that's easily fixable. Go to our modifiers and then just crank it up another centimeter. Perfect. Our band should now just barely be sticking outside of our beer keg. Our tap still looks quite acceptable. No other abnormalities. I'm gonna grab everything, Control A, and we're gonna apply our scales. Let's check what the orientation of our meshes are at the moment. Everything is, there's no rotation, there's no rotation. Okay. Everything, Control A, let's apply scale and rotation just to make sure that everything's rotation is set to 0. So it's as if this is the way it was created from the moment that we pressed add cube, and then bam. This is just how the cube looked. Okay. For the next step, I'm going to switch over to our shading panel over here at the top. I'm going to do some little bit of cheating. I'm going to go split screen. Say duplicate into new area. I'm going to put it on the right side. So we have a nice large area for our nodes. I'm then going to go into starting to do the textures. First of all, some parts of the nodes that I have designed only work in an Eevee at the moment, or as far as I could only get them working in Eevee. So I'm going to drop the textures in so you guys can see how they look in cycles rendering. I'm going to go over here to the top and then just select a shading, viewport shading. So this will be fine. Next I'm going to select the wood for the mug. And I just drag it a bit bigger. Again, we'll get back to the geometry now, to the nodes in a moment. What's that one? I grab my material. Material 2 on this wood. Since these are both the same direction. I want my bottom. Wooden bottom and wooden bottom to appear here. Then I want the rest of my material to have my metal, dark metal. So I'm just going to select, Control L. Then I'm going to duplicate the materials by linking them so they share the same material. At the moment, our wood texture is not going to work on our barrel, so we'll get to modifying the texture so it works on the barrel too. But the metal texture does work as is. Link materials. So that should give us all exactly the same material. So I'm going to start off with the metal texture since it's the easiest one. I'm not going to say the easiest one, but it's the one that actually works across all of the meshes, thanks to the fact that it doesn't have a grain onto it. It doesn't have a particular direction that the lines are moving. It's everywhere. It looks like metal that's been hammered. That's it. And so you now see the wood in how Eevee would render it. So if you were to render it in Eevee, you would get exactly the same result as I'm getting at the moment, with your nice inside and the bottom and all of the texture like this. So this is how Eevee would render it. We're going to head over to turning on our render mode. I'm gonna have to add a light. I'm gonna change it to cycles. I'm gonna switch over my settings from CPU to GPU, and then I'm supported to experimental. I'm gonna shift add some lighting, so I can just explain some of the differences. Let's add a 3-point lighting system. Just go far enough out. Which side of the lighting? This one's probably going to work the best. Grab this light. I'm going to adjust its settings just to increase the amount of light that it's giving off. So we can actually observe. Go from the front. Let's increase it quite a bit. Just going to continue increasing my brightness of my lights until I'm happy enough to show you what I would like to show you. I think that's enough. Okay, there's a couple of things that I'm gonna except for all the artifacting from Eevee, from cycles. Just show you some key differences. So our metal looks pretty much the same between the two render engines. This one's just got the HDRI in the background, so that's why it's showing off a little bit more reflectiveness. Well, this one doesn't have at the moment. You're going to see some highlights and stuff like this, but the metal looks pretty much the same. It's the wood that has quite a large difference. You'll see around all the edges we have an edge wear, which is one of the parts of the texture which is only available in cycles, thanks to some of the nodes only working on cycles. So basically when you're going to render it in Eevee, you're going to have this, but when you're going to render in cycles, but both are acceptable. I like both of them. I will most likely do the final render in either Eevee or cycles. It will just depend. You guys should see it when it's up. I think I'm going to go with cycles since it just adds that nice edge wear. Even though the Eevee render is going to be like 1,000 times faster, this one just gives it that nice, it's like been used. Okay, let's go over to cycles, to Eevee, not to kill our performance. Just go split screen again, since we're actually far enough to do that. Let's just zoom in one of the cups. That's all I need for this production. Okay, we're gonna do the metal one first. So let me just grab the other page, make it other half screen. Okay, so as you can see, this one is not very complex. It's pretty simple. We have a texture coordinates as our input. We're going to use the object instead of the generated one. Then we're going to plug it into a mapping node, and we're going to start fiddling with the scale. In this case, for the scale for this object I have and the size of the object itself, I ended up with these numbers. Okay. I'm just going to show the texture, so I'm not going to explain too much about it because there's quite a bit of knowledge that needs to go into and planning, and then random just guesswork when making these textures that you just have to fiddle around with this, the parameters themselves, the values. Then you get something that looks nice. Then you feed it into a noise texture. So by default, this just gets you the placement of the mesh, the size of the object, and then this changes the scale. So for instance, it will give you the idea that there's like 400 objects fitting into this space over here. And then we'll feed it into a noise texture as its position data, as a vector data, as a vector input. We'll leave the scale as is. I think the detail we leave as is, the roughness, everything else I think is default. But if it isn't, just copy these values. Then we feed it into a color ramp. This color ramp is what we're going to use to make a difference between our tap and that of the metal rings for our beer mug and the beer keg itself. So if you increase the slider, you will have more of a clean metal look rather than a worn metal. Probably going to keep it like this. For make it too flat, you're going to end up with the surface that looks a lot more cartoony, if that's the style you wish to go for. Just going to leave this as is. We'll make some changes to this when we get to making our texture for our tap. Then we feed it into another color ramp, 2 color ramps, as we want to use the one for the base color itself. We want to have a color ramp for our roughness, and we want to have a bump, which will then give us our normal map. As you can see, we have a black and we have a gray, and it's set at these positions. Black is set to 0 and the gray is set to this. This just helps us with the amount of black to gray. A lot of black, a lot of gray. So this helps us with the highlights. Is it all black? Is it black in the crevices and silver at the top? Again, you can adjust all of these to get a different style. This goes into your base color. Our metallic is set to 1. If you don't set it to 1, you're gonna end up with a plastic looking material. But you set it to 1, get a nice shiny surface, very reflective. But again, since it's rough, it's not gonna be very reflective. Our roughness is also manipulated by our color that we get for the actual texture. Then we pass it into a color ramp with the following settings. At 0, 0, we have a gray, which is just got a value of 3. And then at 1, we have 1 full white, or 0.8 white. It's never full. So it's never 100% rough, and it's also not 100% smooth, or else you're going to end up with a mirror-like surface, which is not something that's going to look very nice. For the bump, we just set the input as the height. So the difference between the highest point, which is a light gray, and the darkest point, we feed into the height to create a height map. And then off the height map, we generate our bump, which is then output for our normal. So here we can generate how much we want it to bump in or out. It's going to give us a different style depending on what settings you have. So I just left it at 0.3. That was perfectly acceptable for me. Finally, we have our new version that came with Blender 4.2. I think it's our new Principled BSDF shader. It looks a lot better than it previously did. Still got our subsurface and so on, just a lot cleaner now. So the normal is plugged in. We have a roughness, base color, and we have an alpha of 1. The refraction index we just leave as is, since we don't have any glass or crystal material that actually allows light to penetrate it and then start refracting on the inside, giving it an interior distortion or allow light to pass through. Oh, and we're going to set the metallic to 1, and we're going to pass it to a surface. So if you're done and you've used all the settings, you should have a material similar to the one on the left, and also your node should look something similar to this. Again, you can play around with all of the values. Probably going to find something that looks better than this. Again, this is just the colors and styles that I picked for the metal. In the next part, we will start with the wood. Let's start with the wood. Just gonna slowly scroll out so I don't jump so much. I'm going to select my cup. So we have our texture active in the right side. I'm going to move over to our viewport shading so we can actually see a bit more of the texture. I'm just going to go to a little bit more top down view so I can show these edges. Okay, this top part over here, the part at the top is going to handle the edgeware itself. The part over here is going to handle face highlights. Then we have a part over here that handles the cavities. So it's going to give us some cavity. And make it dark over there. And then we finally have our wood grain, which is this set of nodes over here. For the wood texture, I'm just going to go through it, showing all the values. I'm not going to explain much because it's a bit difficult. I'm going to need a whole tutorial just about that. So we start off with the noise texture with these settings. We plug it into a map range. We change the min and the max, and also the 2 min and max. Input it into a bevel, which gives us these edges. We use some position data from the object, in this case the normal, so the direction each edge is pointing in. We do a dot product. We put that dot product's value out into a map range. We decrease the minimum value as it's going to have a pretty low value, pretty tight but very low value. And then we invert it. And then again we use a color ramp to invert it again, and then push it down pretty tight, or else you'll just flood the whole mesh. Then we put it into a different color ramp, and then we push it up, again inverted, so the white at the bottom and the black at the top. And then finally we push it into a darken as the factor. The color over here has these values for the dark brown, which is the reason why the edges are dark brown. And we clamp the factor. Next, we're gonna go over to our geometry, to our face highlights. We again take a pointiness we again take the geometry, we take the pointiness of the faces, and put it into a color ramp. We push the black up and the white down. We then fit it into a gamma. Take the gamma, put it into a multiply. We multiply it by a noise texture, so it's not equally white, equally highlighted. Then we take the multiplication and put it into a mix. Just not grab everything, put it into a mix. As a factor, over here we have the value by which we want to light these faces. So in this case it's a light brown, or more of a yellow mustard color. And then we put that as the A for our darken. Okay, we're gonna go over to our ambient occlusion, which is the darkness between the crevices. Take a noise texture with these parameters. Put it into an ambient occlusion. This node only works in cycles, if I'm correct. It's the only way I can get it to work, because if the moment you go out of cycles to any of the other renderers, you lose this. But what's nice, if you do your textures in cycles, and you eventually get to the end point, you can bake the textures out, and then they should work on Eevee as well. You should already have these edgeware and the dirt and stuff like that. Again, we check our ambient occlusions output, put it into a color ramp, invert it, and we bring our black value down to half. And then our white value slightly up to 0.023. We take this value then and put it into a darken as the factor. So usually you just drop in a mix in here, and then you just change it to darken, because that's the default mode, and then you change it to darken. So it's going to make every part that is influenced by the factor, which is this value, darker by the second value. That's everything. Okay, here we are working with our wood grain and the color and the direction of the wood grain itself. We start off with a generated texture coordinate, as we don't need object, normal, UV, or any of the other. We don't want it to change depending on where our camera is looking or anything like that. We then put it into a mapping and we increase the scale in the X and the Y axis. So in the X and the Y axis, and decrease it in the Z axis so it stretches in the vertical axis but gets compressed in the X and the Y, giving us a lot of strips like this, but a long strips. That's what gives us the wood grain. Then we feed it into a noise texture. So this is the noise texture that generates the actual wood. We put it then into a color ramp to bring those values up nice and tight, or else you're going to have quite a detailed texture. I didn't want to do that for my style. I wanted some clearly noticeable darker parts of the wood and lighter parts of the wood. If you go too fine, you're going to get a very detailed wood, which is also acceptable, just depending on your style. The same for the light part. If you move it up, you're going to get a lot more brown, but this part is actually going to determine how many patches you're going to get. So if you move the darkness down, this is the current values for the black and for the white. From this color ramp, we're going to get 3 separate nodes. One for the alpha, one for the albedo, the base color, one for the roughness, and then a map for our bump, so our normal map. So the colors I picked for the wood, the dark parts and the light parts of the normal wood without our ambient occlusion, our surface highlight, and our edge wear on it, is set to this brown, these values, and then our light wood, it's set to this value. We then plug this color ramp into A of our darkness ramp, which is attached to our ambient occlusion, which then goes into our ambient occlusion, so our cavity map. Then it plugs into our face highlight, and finally it again plugs into our edge wear to give our final edge look. Then that goes into the base color. Then for the roughness, we have 2 grayish values at the 0 mark or 0 position. We have a 0.4, and at our 1 position we have a 0.6. So this means that the texture itself won't be 100% rough, nor will it be 100% smooth, as it will give you a mirror-like surface, which isn't exactly what this type of mug I would like it to look like. Take the roughness, you take the value from this color ramp and then put it into the roughness. Next we're going to do our bump, which is just going to give us a little effect of, you'll see it more on the edges like this, where it looks like the wood is actually 3-dimensional, even though it's flat, perfectly 45-degree angle. That's it. We have this color ramp at the moment I don't think does anything, just due to the strength of our bump. So we have a black at 0 and a white at 1, and you would use this to clamp how much of an influence you have alongside your bump map. So you would bring this value up to decrease how deep the wood goes, and then bring the white down to decrease how much the wood stands out. Looks like it's standing out. We then plug this color ramp into our height. On our bump we set the strength to 0.1, so 10% of the full strength of the map. Our distance is set to 1. We then plug our bump's output into our normal map, and that is it for our cups wood texture at the top and the bottom. Next, we're gonna go to the next texture, wood texture, which is the texture for the cup's bottom. It has a slightly different texture. I'm just gonna go out of the viewport shading so you can actually see the texture. It does not use the edge wear, as it doesn't need it, because I doubt that you're ever gonna look at the cup's bottom and be like, oh, nice edge wear. So it doesn't have edge wear on it, but it still has a similar looking texture to the rest of the cup, just a bit darker, because usually would have more liquid staying at the bottom of your mug, staining it dark color than the rest of the wood. So I'm just going to select the bottom of this mug. Let's head over to the texture. You'll see this has a far more simplistic texture. Just going to go in the top so we can see what changes we're making as we go. Okay, so we start out with a texture coordinate. Generated texture should be fine. You can even use object if you really would like. We take the generated texture, put it into a mapping node. We change the scale in the y-axis and leave the x and the z alone. You can increase the z-axis if you don't want it to have these spots. Just squish it and then you'll have more of a line going across like this. We then take our mapping and put it into a noise texture, which actually generates the noise, the lines of these parameters. We then clamp it using our color ramp. We bring the black values up to 0.45 and we bring our white value down to 5.91. We then pull it into exactly the same colors as we used for our wood over here. Exactly the same color ramp. You can just copy it from the other texture and paste it into this one. So it's exactly the same settings if I'm correct. Exactly the same color. Then the same for this one. Or at least it should be. But you don't have to. I just did. So the values should be very similar, if not exactly the same. Next, for our base color, I made the wood darker by using an RGB curve. So you plug your color into your RGB curve and then you use this curve. Depending on if you want it more red, you would then add a node to make it more red. In this case, it just makes it more green. I think I push it this way, it should be more red. But I don't need this, so I'm not going to change that. But I did change, I think this is the value. So this makes it darker or lighter. So I just changed it slightly to give us a darker wood. So as you can see, it's slightly curved. I just click on the line and then add up and then pull it to whichever direction you want. Then I plug this RGB curve into my base color. Next, we are going to build our roughness map. Again, we take our color output, put it into a color ramp, and I think the colors should be fairly similar to the other one, 0.3. I think this one is at 0.6 as well. Again, we want the wood to look very similar to each other. Then we have our bump map. I think this one is exactly the same constructed as the previous one. We have our value at black and our value at white, which is 1. We then plug it into a bump map, set strength to 0.1. Feed that output back into the normal map, and that is the texture for both of our woods. In the next part of the video, we're gonna go and construct our barrels texture, as we're gonna use either both of the textures, the both of the woods, or one of the woods, but as we have already applied the metal, it's already playing quite nicely. Like I said, we're gonna have to make some changes to our wood texture to properly work with our barrel. So I'm just gonna pause here. For the barrel, we're going to use all 3 textures, and we're going to make ourselves variations of the ones we already have. We're going to start off by doing this front panel, since it's the simplest one to create first. We go over to our materials. We're going to click on our metal. We'll click on our wooden bottom. You'll see the texture isn't showing correctly. That's simple to fix. We're just gonna change the scale for the Z-axis to the Y-axis, and then the Y-axis to the Z-axis. Perfect. Now we have our wood for the front and the back done. Pretty easy. See? We can also use exactly this same wood. Actually, we just broke our wood for our. Okay, we want to press this little new material, so we don't change the wood for the bottom of our cup, because that would not be very nice. So you press the new material one, it gets a number at the back. Then we can go and change our scale by swapping the 2 around. Which is going to give us exactly the texture that we would like to see. We can use exactly this same texture on the legs, so we can just click on the legs, click on the face, Control L, and link materials, which would give us a similar looking material to the faces, which is going to look really nice. There's no other parameters we need to change. Again, you can go around here and change the darkness using this RGB curve over here if you wish to have darker or lighter wood, but I'm not gonna, as it was pretty dark already. Next, we're gonna go over and separate our tap from our barrel. As you can see, they're currently attached. You also see our texture moves as the world moves, as it moves around the world. This is due to the fact that we are using the generated texture as our input for over here, a texture coordinates, because it takes into account where the object is in the world when you use a mirror modifier and stuff like that. Okay, so we're going to start by separating our tap from our object by going into tab. We're going to go and select our mesh using edge select, that way we don't have to worry about where we're selecting. Press P selection, so it separates it. Next, we're going to go and select our barrel. We might want to bevel our back edges, as I see, thanks to the way we modeled the mug, these ones aren't. Just gonna grab this edge. We'll deselect those front facing edges in just a moment. Just inside edges just in a moment. And now we can just go and deselect these edges. And I think we also need to, actually no, we actually can select those edges. It's perfectly fine. Control B. I think it's going to be 1 centimeter. 0, 1, 0, 1, 5. Okay, so it's 5 centimeters since we scaled it 5 times as big as what it originally was. Now, those edges look just about the right size, equal to these ones. Okay, so now our front and our back of our barrel look exactly the same. Now we're going to start out with the texture. Again, we're going to select our texture, material 2. You'll immediately notice this looks more like the spots of an animal than it looks like the grain of a wood. But that's to be expected. Again, we're going to create a new version of it. The new version, we're going to go over to our texture itself and not any of the other parameters. we're going to go over here and we're going to flip our Y and set it equal to our Z. So our Z is going to be 20 and our Y is going to be 0.1. And now our texture is fixed. It's giving us exactly the same look as our cups are. Same dotted at the top and the lines going across. So depending on which axis you have your barrel aligned to, you would either set your y-axis to 0.1 or you would set your x-axis to 0.1, as it depends on the direction your wood is facing at the moment. When you bake these out later on, if you do decide to, I'm not going to show that in this tutorial, we'll do that in another one. You will then be able to also use the edgeware. The moment you'll see our edgeware isn't working as nice as it did for the cups, but that's just due to the scale of the object. To fix this, we're going to click on our wood and we're going to go all the way up to our edgeware. We get our noise texture, which decides how our edgeware is spread, and then our map range over here determines exactly how much of the edge we want to wear. So if you decrease the maximum, you'll start to see it coming in. I think if you decrease our minimum a bit more, just put it to 0.35. I think we need to increase the maximum to bring it down a bit. Let's try that. 4. Let's try that. 3.3. 2. There. Now our edgeware is clearly visible on this barrel as well, and it looks fairly similar to our mug. Next we're going to go over to our tap. It's going to have 2 textures on it, one for the wooden part over here and then a different texture which is going to be exactly the same as this one but just a lighter variant of it. We're going to select our tap. We're going to add 2 texture slots. For our second texture slot, we're going to go and then you can either select this face over here or this edge loop and then Control plus plus all the way until you reach over here. Then another plus. So that's the area I want to use for my second texture. So for my second texture, I'm going to use exactly the same texture as I use for the front of the barrel and the legs, as I've already made the changes. You can make a different texture if you wish. So that is texture bottom 1. So I just want to grab bottom 1. Next, we're gonna grab our metal texture again on the first slot, which would be just material 1. And we're gonna make a variant of it. Now we're gonna go and zoom out. We're gonna go over to there's 2 places you're gonna have to change to make your texture not as metallic. I'm just gonna switch over to the other render mode so you can actually see a bit clearer, as I should change the lighting a bit more to get that rendering out for the render. I'm going to change our amount of metal over here, and we're also gonna decrease our move our black slightly to the right over here. This is exactly what I want for our tap. Go over to your Evo rendering. It's gonna end up something like this, which is perfect. Okay, for the rendering, we're going to do a couple of things. First of all, we're going to expand this. We want to get rid of these lights that I added to demonstrate. So we're going to go over to our render collection. I'm going to delete the camera and the light that's in there. Next, I'm going to hide this template. I want to select everything else that's left over in the scene. It should be I want to copy this, Control C, V, press M, and move it into a new collection. Call it final. I want to hide our models. Next, we're gonna go and move these around so they're above the X and Y axis. I grab the cups, GZ 0.11, as there are 20 centimeters plus the 1 centimeter for the bottom. Now we want to move the beer keg. This one you're just gonna have to freehand, so it's just above the line. Perfect. Next, we're gonna grab our beer keg and our mugs, move them in the x-axis until you have the beer keg on the one side of the y-axis and the mugs on the other side. Next, we're gonna drag both mugs forward. Just gonna select our mugs. G in the y-axis. Grab the one mug. G in the y-axis. R in the z-axis, so we could just get some little bit offset. G in the x-axis. Get a bit closer. And take this and bring it a bit closer to our beer keg. Right around here should be fine. We're now just going to add a nice little floor so we can have an area which will catch the shadows. So that's going to be quite easy. We're going to add a plane in. I'm going to change its dimensions to 1 meter, as that should be more than enough in the width, the depth of the floor. We're gonna S in the X 1.2. So this will give us an extra 20 centimeters. Move it until we just about around here. So our center point should just be underneath the edge of the beer keg. Now that that is ready, we're gonna go and add our modifiers now. So we're gonna go back to our modifiers. Click on the spanner, we're gonna add a generate, we wanna add a solidify. On top of our solidify, we also wanna add a bevel. We wanna set our solidify to solidify the thickness to about 3 centimeters, I think should be fine. Don't want our planks to be too thick. We're then gonna go over to our bevel modifier. We're gonna change our amount from 10 centimeters to 0.01 centimeter. 0.005. That's nice. Now we're gonna go and divide our. Go into edit mode, divide our plane into 5 chunks, 5 planks. So we're going to do 4 edge loops. We're going to select every second one and separate them by pressing Y. Grab those. I'm going to grab each one of those and then just make sure they're loose. I'm going to grab all our planks. We're going to go into individual origins, S in the Y, and just scale it a tiny bit so we give ourselves a little bit of gaps between the planks. Perfect. Next we're going to grab the top edge, since these planks are at the moment just flat planes, and then just move them so they're staggered. Go on close, Make sure that nothing is actually overhanging. Let me just grab this one. Have a nice staggered edge. The same on the other side. This one is sticking out a bit too far. It's quite a lot noticeable. That looks nice. Next, we're gonna go and add our texture to our planks. I'm gonna say auto shade smooth. And then we're gonna go and drop on our texture. I've already made a variation of the one of the textures. I believe it's the one that we use for the front of our beer keg. I've made a nice dark wood. If you want to copy over the settings, let me just open up the shading tab. So all I've done is change this curve to have this positions, which gives us the dark wood. Change nothing else. Go back to my layout. Okay. The next thing we're gonna do is take our plane. We're gonna move this to our render, to our render collection. As we're gonna click on it, we're gonna say shift add, and we wanna go and add ourselves the 3-point lighting. I'm gonna go over, I'm gonna leave it as this for the moment. You can fiddle around with the settings depending on if you're gonna use Eevee or cycles to render your models out. I'm gonna use Eevee. For a couple of reasons. It's a lot faster. Plus, I'm gonna go and bake the textures using cycles. So all these added edge wear. Just take one of these lights and increase its energy. I'm gonna take, yeah, this is where you increase the energy of the lighting. So it balances all the other lights out. So I'm then just gonna go and bake out my textures. So first of all, I don't get this weird glitch you'll see over here. For some reason it does this on this one plank. For the rendering, it's a I'm assuming it's a bug to do with the denoiser. You can see it more clearly when the denoiser is on. But anyway, I'm then gonna go and bake these textures. So I already have the edge wear and everything else baked, which is gonna speed the process up a lot when I use cycles. When I use Eevee to do the final render. I need like a minute long video for both the intro and for the short. Go back to this. Next, to get ourselves our turntable to work properly and work nice and efficient, we're gonna go and add ourselves an empty. We're gonna add ourselves a sphere. Doesn't matter exactly where we put it, as long as we technically it would be better if we place it in the center of the planks. So we're gonna grab our UV sphere, just move it until it's about center of the object. If you've added your objects correctly and you have deleted your camera, there should be a new camera added with the lighting. We are now just gonna reposition this camera a bit. We can see our beer mugs and keg are it's not focused enough and is a bit off to the center. So that should be perfect. We can even rotate this a bit flatter. just going to leave it like this. Now we're going to select let's just hide our empty. Yeah, I'll hide our lighting for now. Don't want to select that. We can even hide our cameras. We want to select this then. I'm going to go and find our empty and unhide it. I'm going to select the empty. Press Ctrl P. And then keep transform. So if you've done everything correctly, if you rotate your empty now, you should have a turntable animation ready to go for your model. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and change my render resolution. If you want to do a couple of test renders, you're basically going to set your final render resolution over here. In this case, a 1920 by 1080 image or video sequence. Then you're going to change the percentage depending on, you want to do a test animation of the speed and stuff. You're probably going to do at like 25% of the full resolution. And then once you get a full resolution, when you're ready and everything is done, you set the resolution to 100%. This speeds up the process quite significantly when you're doing tests. Next, you want to change your output location to wherever you want to save your renders or your videos, your images or videos. Finally, you're going to change your format. If you're going to render images, you're going to pick images, PNG, JPEG, one of these for your images. And if you want to do videos, you're usually going to pick FFmpeg or RAW or something like that to do your video in. There's a variety of options here. Okay, next, you wanna, if you wanna have a clear, transparent background, you're gonna go over to your camera. Under your camera icon, you'll go to film and you want to turn on transparent. This will, if you render out, just give you a transparent background. I think I can just do a quick see we have a transparent background now. So there's nothing in the background. We'll use, for instance, when you do your composition of your video, you will then apply a background color to fill in the rest of the scene, a gray or a blue, something that matches the rest of your video or your set. If you want to do like an icon for maybe like a weapon, or in this case maybe a drink of some kind. Okay, there is one more thing. Okay, we're going to set up an HDRI to improve our lighting even further. We're going to head over to our shading tab. We're going to change it from object to world environment. Just going to zoom out. I'm going to make it a bit bigger so it takes more of the screen up. I'm going to switch over to render view. As you can see, my lights are currently off. Exactly the perfect demo. So a tiny bit. Shift add. They're just not showing on this view. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, shift add. I'm gonna search for environment. Grab this environment texture, drop it in. Gonna link the color to the color. Gonna go to wherever you saved your HDRI. In this case, I saved it over here. Perfect. Our HDRI is showing. Go and make sure that we are actually not displaying it when general transparent. This should automatically hide your HDRI if it isn't on already from one of the previous steps. So now you'll have a transparent background, but you can then take this video out into Adobe or Premiere or whatever video editing software you use. You can even put it back into Blender and then compile your video there. Okay, now just to finish off the lighting, I'm going to go out of shading. You can use this to adjust the strength of how bright your HDRI is. I'm not going to adjust it over here because I just want this to be a nice flood fill for all the nice cavities and stuff like that. I'm going to go over to back to my layout. I'm going to go back to rendering, and then I'm going to turn on my lights again. Now you guys are ready to render. There you guys have three options. First option, you render out the EV version. The EV version of the texture. Just give it a sec to switch out the textures. You're gonna render something like this out. Or you can go over to cycles and render it out like this. I can see one prominent glitch in the texture, or the renderer at least. I don't exactly know why it's doing this. I'm assuming there's a bug in the code. So that's the only reason I'm probably not going to render it this way, even though this is going to give us a far better style. And then your third and final option is to bake your textures and then render it out in Eevee in any way. Because then you're going to get the speed of Eevee with the texture quality of cycles. And that's it. This is where I'm going to leave you guys. Have a great day.